Hi, I'm Nisha DeGaring, host of Good Things Utah, and I've been a longtime supporter of Todd's Belief Cast. I hope you find inspiration in the courageous stories shared by the amazing people Todd features on his show. The guests serve as shoulders for us to stand on, allowing us to see a little further and cultivate belief in oneself. Remember, you have the dignity and power to change. I encourage you to keep striving and believing in yourself. Enjoy today's podcast.
I want to take a moment to express my heartfelt gratitude to the incredible sponsors of the BeliefCast podcast. First, Craig from Craig Swap & Associates. If you need an attorney, he's your guy. Trustworthy, compassionate, always there when you need him most. Next, Wasatch Recovery, the greatest university on the planet, transforming lives one day at a time. Sandy from Minky Couture, the creative genius behind the most comfortable blanket you'll ever wrap yourself in. Comfort like no other. The visionaries behind Thread wallets. These wallets redefine style and functionality. Dave Philippi from Micro Plus, pushing the boundaries of nanotechnology and scientific research to bring us cutting-edge supplements for optimal health. The Ralphs and the Debenhams, creators of Mori Nutrition and Calm. Because if you're struggling with sleep, feeling stressed, or can't focus, Calm is your answer. Special thanks to the award-winning pianist Paul Cardall for his beautiful music that brings inspiration to every episode. And finally, Gab Wireless, letting kids be kids and giving parents the peace of mind they deserve. Right now, Gab is offering $25 off any device to new customers with no contract required. That's $25 off any Gab smartphone or smartwatch. Just go to gab.com/belief. That's where you'll get the best deal. That's gabb.com/belief. Thank you to all these amazing sponsors for supporting the BeliefCast podcast and empowering us to continue spreading positivity and inspiration to the world. And we are back. This is Todd Sylvester with the Todd Inspires BeliefCast. As always, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for all your support. And again, a shout out to my sponsors. Appreciate all the belief and support you give me. It means the world to me. Guys, you're in for a treat today. As always, I bring on some amazing people, and today's going to be one of those days. Today, we are joined by Ty Reed. Ty, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. Looking forward to the conversation. Yeah,
it's going to be great. A little bit on Ty. He's an author, recovery coach, and advocate for second chance hiring. He has transformed his life experiences into a mission of helping other people. I mean, he's battled addiction, homelessness, multiple run-ins with criminal justice system, and the list goes on. He now is the founder of Recovery Career Services, and he's, again, like we said, he's written a book, Second Chance Hiring. We're going to talk about that, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity to be able to learn more about you, Ty, and how we can spread your light to this world a little further.
I appreciate that.
You bet. Why don't we start off, tell us where you grew up and a little bit about your family and your childhood.
Sure. I grew up mainly in the South. So I was born in a small town outside of Memphis, Tennessee, in the same town that my dad and my mom were both born in.
Okay.
Moved all over the South because my dad was a traveling, or I guess a corporate ladder climber, I should say. I guess a traveling corporate ladder climber, as one could say. And so I lived in Tennessee, Georgia, and Virginia until relocating for my high school years out in Spokane, Washington, and I've been in Washington State ever since.
Okay, great. So what were some of the things you got involved with as a child?
I used to really like to draw, and
Okay.
Frankly, I got grounded a lot. So I used to really like to sit in my room and sing to the radio. And I'm still a pretty avid singer today. I'm a major karaoke geek. But
Okay.
I just remember as a kid sitting in my room and trying to figure out how to sing like Michael Jackson. And that really was pretty formative for me. I don't read music, but I am ear trained because of all of that. And I've sung in a couple of cover band experiences, and I've karaoke hosted, and I sing a bunch of karaoke. So that was pretty formative for me. And I also was pretty studious. My dad had a rule when I was growing up that I had to study for 2 hours every day after school before I could go outside and play as part of the last free-range generation that lived outside, Generation X.
Yep.
And so I studied for 2 hours every day, and I was a latchkey kid, so I let myself in. After school, I studied for 2 hours on my own just because my dad instilled that discipline in me. And then I went out and I'd play with my friends. And that was pretty much my existence for my young years into teenagehood.
Wow, that's impressive. So it sounds like, for a lack of a better way of saying it, your dad was pretty strict.
He was. He believed
Yeah.
and still believes in discipline. I wouldn't say
Yeah.
that he was strict in the sense that his rules overall were really strict or that he was a micromanager. But
Okay.
there were. When I think about my story, I actually don't think there's anything extraordinary about my story itself. I really think the things that I've been able to overcome in my life, that most anybody could overcome with some work and a lot of help like I had. But what was different about my household is that there was a level of expectation that was set.
Okay.
It wasn't a debate about whether I was going to graduate high school and get good grades. It wasn't a debate about whether I was ever going to go to college. It was just a matter about, where was I going to go? What was I going to study? Because it was an expectation that had been set in the household. And so, that is that expectation about studying and getting a good education and making sure that I had the most opportunities available to me was something that was instilled really early on.
Wow, I love that. And it's pretty impressive that you would come home on your own and you knew you had to do 2 hours of studying and you did it.
Yeah.
It sounds like.
I was a really easy kid. I've been a difficult adult, but I was a really easy child to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, that's funny. And I'd like to get into that. So, sounds like childhood was, fairly normal for you.
Yep.
Again, I love that your father instilled in you discipline. Discipline's one of those things that it's one of those magical traits that we can develop. And I'm sure you see it, what you're doing in all the success you've had now. So you obviously were doing really good, but you've been through a lot. We mentioned addiction, homelessness. I mean, multiple run-ins with the law, and so why don't we get into that? Like, what changed? Because it sounds like you were, for lack of a better way of saying it, on the right path as you were growing up.
I was, but there were some signs early on that I might be headed towards trouble with substances. I didn't drink a whole lot in high school. I didn't study a whole lot in high school, but I was still pretty much a straight A student, and went off to my first year of college and started drinking. And pretty much drank my way out of my first college within about a year and a half.
Wow.
So I hadn't picked up drugs yet. I was never really a drug person early on, but I was a binge drinker. What most people would probably call a normal drinker. I didn't really drink during the week, but on the weekends I tied it on pretty hard, and that kind of followed me throughout my career. So I would I'd be asked to leave politely from that college experience, and would eventually go on to get a degree at the age of 28 from the University of Washington in undergrad. But all along the way, I was a pretty standard American drinker, I would say. It wasn't until I turned, just before I turned 30, that hard drugs really entered the picture, and they had a pretty significant impact. So I went straight to the bad stuff. I went right to crack right away.
Wow.
And so I was an alcoholic and a crack addict, even while I was actually achieving pretty mightily in my professional life. I ended up working for a division of GE, and was pretty well respected and recognized. Ended up being in the top 10% of sales and business development people nationwide for one of their divisions, and was living a pretty solid professional life, but was also living a secret life at night. I was an alcoholic. I was a crack addict. I quite regularly would stay up for days at a time, and at the time was married. So as you can imagine, I was making my wife and my stepchild at that time pretty miserable.
Yeah.
But because even back then in late 2000s, I was working from home, I had a way to kind of mask what was going on. So my colleagues didn't know. I had a boss that lived across the state. So I was really able to kind of use my schedule to help me hide my addiction. But frankly, I was being kind of destroyed from the inside out.
Yeah. So, obviously you seem like a really hard worker, and that's what you were doing, but you're also going really hard in that wrong direction with the substance abuse. And so how did you get to a place where you became homeless? What happened there?
Well, eventually crack addiction would give way to meth addiction. And while I'd been a somewhat functional crack addict, if you could really say that, for about 10 years by that point, once meth entered the picture, things got pretty ugly pretty quickly. I started doing meth in 2012, and by the middle of 2014 was homeless on the street and unemployable. and spent the next couple of years experiencing a lot of the stuff that, people like me experience when you become homeless and addicted. I started going to jail a whole bunch of times, and
Yeah.
I really got to learn what street life was about. Had a failed stint in rehab in 2015, my last trip to rehab, but still took me about another year to actually get sober because I wasn't really ready when I went to rehab. But it did instill in me the need or the recognition that I needed to change some stuff. And one of the
Right.
things that is often said in recovery is to change your life and get sober. You only got to change one thing, and that's everything. And so I had to change, people, places, and things. So first I started changing the places where I was hanging out, which for me was a string of really crappy hotels up and down a boulevard in a particularly bad part of town. And then I started changing the people that I hung out with. And so then for the last few months of my use, I was frankly just kind of hanging out in hotels by myself, using alone. And then, for some reason in March of 2016, I had kind of had enough. And I knew that getting sober was the last move that I had. So I, finally took that step. It was scary, quite
Yeah.
frankly. And there was a
Sure.
part of me that wasn't sure that I wanted it to work,
Yeah.
but because there was so much uncertainty about it. And I really didn't remember what it was like to live a normal life. But it's the best thing that ever happened to me, quite frankly.
Yeah, sure. I want to talk about what was your mental state as you're going through this, because you're a very smart guy. Like we talked about earlier, you learned discipline at a very young age, but here you are living kind of like I guess you were playing small, if you will. Like you're living well below your potential. I can only imagine what your family and friends were seeing. They're watching you go down this, dark abyss. What was your mental state like during all that?
I felt, even though I was a really successful professional and frankly making a whole bunch of money and had a beautiful wife and a fantastic stepdaughter, I
Yeah.
felt trapped. And the thing that on further reflection, so I've learned about myself through outside help. I do therapy too, besides still doing recovery stuff. Freedom is the most important value in my entire life. And what I have demonstrated over and over again is that I'm going to feel free for better or for worse.
Right.
And I think what was happening during that time was that I was just looking for a way to feel free in this life that admittedly I had built through choices, but came with a lot of obligations. I mean, there's an obligation to being a highly recognized and visible person within a Fortune 50 company who's performing really well. There's a obligation to being a family man and trying to remain an upstanding, reputable person. At least for me, there was.
Yeah.
And so in a lot of ways, I just didn't feel free, which was an illusion. It was a delusion. I was deluding myself. I was free, but I didn't feel that way. And so I was looking for all these ways to find some sort of freedom. And unfortunately for me, it came through excessive use of drugs and alcohol.
Yeah. Wow. So what was the response, or I guess how is your family reacting to you going through all this? Were they trying to reach out to you?
Yeah, they were.
Yeah.
Not well. But what can a family do when they have someone that they love that's literally killing themselves? There's not much, because as the tough thing about addiction is you can't throw money at and solve the problem. You can't love somebody enough and solve the problem. You can't yell at them a whole bunch and solve the problem. It really is one of those things that kind of has to run its course, which is really scary for families. And I know it's scary for mine because it's an unpredictable course. You don't know where it's going to end up. And especially towards the end of my use, I remember having a conversation with my dad shortly after I entered recovery. And he said, we had just kind of decided we were collecting your mail at the house because you were using our address as your mailing address. But we kind of decided that either you were going to get sober or we were going to bury you.
Wow.
And those were really the two choices that we had to come to. Now, this was after a whole lot of, me going to jail and them bailing me out and them really kind of being there for me and trying to support me in whatever ways they could. But at the same time, they also drew some pretty rigid boundaries with me. I wasn't allowed at their house without them being there for a long time. I couldn't, when I was homeless on the street, I couldn't sleep at their house. Yeah. So, they would occasionally help me out with money. Every once in a while, my dad would come out and take me to lunch or something and then, go by Costco and buy me some clothes so that I wasn't walking around in tattered clothing out there. But really, they did what they should have done, which is set up some really good boundaries with me and not enable me. But
Yeah.
that was only after they'd made some mistakes in how they were trying to love me. And
Yeah.
eventually I put them in a position where they needed to put up an emotional boundary too. And that was one of the things that we worked together and spent a lot of time trying to break down after I got sober so that I could regain their trust.
Yeah. Is it fair to say over your lifetime, you were really close to your dad?
I can say that now.
Yeah.
I would say that I probably thought that we had a good relationship growing up, but it wasn't a great relationship.
Okay.
Mainly because my dad is a very smart guy, and maybe one of the great frustrations that a lot of people can relate to is looking back on your life and realizing that your parents were pretty much right about everything.
Right.
Right. And so my dad was right a lot. And so, I had kind of this resentful adversarial relationship in my mind only, by the way. He didn't view it as adversarial, but it certainly wasn't as close as he would have liked it to be. And our relationship today is fantastic, mainly because I actually know how to shut up and take advice and know when to ask for advice.
Yeah.
And I'm not impulsive like I was before. I've brought back a lot of discipline to my life.
Yeah.
And which is recognizable, and somebody that can be counted on, and my word actually means something now. And so that goes a long way towards the people in my life feeling comfortable with me and wanting me to be around. So I just got to keep doing that.
No, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. I know you're a big proponent and cheerleader for giving people second chances. And I love that. You wrote a book called Second Chance Hiring, and talk a little bit about that and why does that mean so much to you?
Well, it means a lot to me for a couple of reasons. Obviously, personal lived experience. Despite having this really, really great work history, when I got sober in 2016, I hadn't worked for a couple of years. I had horrible credit. And oh, by the way, I had multiple arrests and convictions. So as you can imagine, even though I've got this great education and I had this great verifiable corporate work history, a lot of employers didn't want to take a chance on me. As a matter of fact, I had a couple of employers that I interviewed with for jobs that I was definitely qualified for tell me that, Ty, you're the very best candidate for the job, but because you've got these criminal convictions, I can't hire you for 5 years. Come back in 5 years or come back in 7 years, one of them even said.
Yeah.
And so it really started me thinking about, for somebody like me, who quite frankly has been really lucky in education, not only did I get my undergraduate from the University of Washington, I also happen to have an MBA from there and had it, even when I started my climb back. For somebody like me who's been so lucky in employment and education, if it's this difficult for me, what must that journey be like for somebody who hasn't been as lucky as me or didn't, have the benefit of growing up in the household with a parent who had an expectation that you were going to graduate high school and you're going to go to college? What's that journey really like for them? So as I started to investigate it and think about ways that I could give back to the recovery community and people that might be walking the same path, employment just kept coming up for me over and over and over again. And so I've tried to build my skills to help people who have criminal convictions be able to effectively tell their story to an employer, rebuild their skills, think about long-term career planning, not just the job that they got to have now because their parole or probation officer says they got to have one, or they've got child support obligations they got to take care of, or, they got to eat and pay rent. But, how do we have a conversation where you start to think about what you really want to do 3 years and 5 years from now? Okay. And how can this job that you don't necessarily want to keep forever that you have today, how can that help be a means to an end? How can that help contribute to that in the long run? But and that part of my work is really important. But I also want to highlight that there's another set of second chances that a lot of people don't think about when they hear, second chance employment or second chance hiring. And those are people that are currently working in companies who may be suffering with substance use or mental health problems. Mm-hmm. And, maybe because of those ailments, they have put themselves in a position where they have a rocky relationship with their manager, or they're on a performance improvement plan, or they're on a last chance agreement. And they need to be given a second chance by their current employer to have an opportunity to actually come in and kind of rebuild those, their standing within the organization and not just get fired or let go. And sometimes that means people need to use the company employee assistance program to go to treatment and then return to the organization and really trying to work and address meaningfully the issues they're having in the workplace. Sometimes it means if somebody's having a mental health episode, they need to take a medical leave and then come back to the organization and get that second chance. And I am really honored to be able to work with all of those populations of folks as they kind of put their employment lives back together.
Yeah, wow, that's impressive, and it's so great that that you saw a need here, obviously because of what you went through, and that makes a lot of sense because you had such a great background, if you will, compared to a lot of people, and you were struggling finding anything out there. So, how has this reshaped things? I know you have this. You're the founder of Recovery Career Services, and maybe talk a little bit about that and how do you really help these people, who need that second chance? What does that look like?
Well, I do it in a couple of different ways. I do direct coaching, so I work with
Okay.
primarily individuals that are in early recovery or have recently been released from incarceration. And for those services, it's pro bono or low bono. Many cases, it's totally pro bono in a lot of cases because, quite frankly, when I was kind of putting my life back together, nobody ever charged me a dime for for the help that they gave me, and so it feels wrong for me to charge people. But I also work with individuals who are, sometimes their employer will reach out to me because I offer a recovery coaching program that's focused around employment. So sometimes the company will engage me because they have an employee who is valuable to them but is
Yeah.
struggling in some way, and they want to see if they can offer them some additional support. So the company will reach out and ask me if I can coach them. And in the instances when I've been able to do that, it's been pretty successful. About 2/3 of the people have been able to completely turn around what was happening internally and get back in good standing. As a matter of fact, a couple of them have also been promoted. So it's been pretty gratifying. So those are typically the two ways, at least on the direct work with client side. And then I'm also a professional keynote and public speaker. So I spend a lot of time talking to HR associations and business associations about the importance of offering employment opportunities for people who have criminal justice background and how to build recovery and mental health friendly workplaces.
Has your book made an impact in other, people's organizations and their HR company, departments and stuff? Has that really opened up doors in that area as well?
I've had some people say that, and frankly, Todd, the reason why I wrote the book in many cases, besides being able to inform HR people and businesses, was quite frank. It was just a life goal. I wanted to be able to say I wrote a book, and now I can say I wrote a book, and it's on Amazon. So that was a big life goal of mine, and I'm glad I was able to accomplish it. And I have accomplished it. I have had some HR people say that it's kind of changed their perspective about how they view second chance hiring. And one of the things that I was very careful to do was bring up a lot of companies who have successfully implemented second chance hiring as examples in the book to give some sort of sense as to how successful this could be and what it could look like. I offered a lot of tips. If you're an organization that wants to if you want to make the minimum amount of effort in second chance hiring, do this. If you want to make a medium amount of effort, do this, and this is what it looks like. And if you want to go all out and make maximum effort, this is what it would look like as well.
Okay.
So I've tried to give organizations the options to implement at various levels within their organizations to see what fits them best and where they really can make a difference around the edges. Many companies are going to find it difficult to make wholesale changes. But if you can make a change, like instead of saying you're not going to hire somebody for 5 years that has a criminal conviction, if you can move that to 3 years or 1 year,
Yeah.
and then really take some time to get to know the applicant and figure out what's been happening in their lives since that last conviction occurred, then you're just going to create additional opportunity for people without necessarily completely scrapping what you're doing now, but you're just going to kind of nibble around the edges and create some additional opportunity.
Yeah. No, beautifully said. I'm sure there's a lot of misconceptions about second chance hiring. And I think a big part of it might be just the fear, like, oh, is this person going to, live up to what we need them to do and what have you? So what are some of those misconceptions and how do you overcome those?
Well, some of the misconceptions, as you said, are based in fear and stigma, right? So
Yeah.
are they going to steal from me? Are they
Yeah.
going to commit violence in the workplace? Am I going to get a negligent hiring suit? Well, probably not. As a matter of fact, it's very, very remote. So as far as employee dishonesty goes, there are federal bonding programs that it's a no-cost bond, anywhere up to $25,000 that any employer or any job seeker can apply for. And what it does is it protects the employer for any dishonesty on or off the job. And it's a zero deductible, zero cost bond that they can get in order to offer themselves some protection. As far as negligent hiring goes, the negligent hiring fears are way, way overblown. There was recently a report that came out where a nonprofit organization went back and looked at 50 years worth of negligent hiring cases. And in only a handful of cases was the negligent hiring because, well, number one, only in a handful of cases was it actually successful against the employer. And in the times when it was successful against the employer, it was because the employer had actually engaged in real negligence. So it was things like they hired somebody to be the accountant for the company who had theft or embezzlement charges on the record. They
Right.
hired somebody to be a driver for the company who had multiple DUIs on their record. So clear signs of negligence and things that would have been caught if they just asked just a couple of basic questions. Now, I want to be clear. I am absolutely not against employers running background checks at all. I understand why they do it. It is a part of the system that's going to be difficult for a lot of organizations for what they perceive to be legal protection reasons to get rid of. However, I do have a problem with the way that employers use criminal background checks, because the way that they're actually supposed to use them is to determine three things. And this is according to the EEOC, a guidance that they issued in 2012. They need to determine three things. What's the nature of the crime? How long ago did it occur? And is it connected to the nature of the job that they're applying for? So what that says is, if an employer has somebody come in for the job and they're qualified and they like them and they pull a background check and it's a driver job and they got convicted of a minor drug possession misdemeanor 2 years ago, that should not preclude that person from having that job if they're otherwise qualified. But so often what happens is once an employer sees that background check and sees anything, then everything that happened in the interview, how qualified that person is, completely go out the window, because there's this perception and this stigma that they can't trust this person. And there's a fear that if they do, that they're going to make a mistake and be sued. And so that's the main issue I have. It's the way that the background check is used. It's not the fact that it is used itself. And so that's what I would advise employers to do, is to really take a hard look at the nature of that crime and see whether it applies to the nature of the job. Because again, if somebody stole stuff and you're hiring them to handle cash, that's probably not a hire you want to make. But if they stole something and you're hiring them to be a salesperson that is going to be out in the field working directly with customers, that's probably a hire that you can make, especially if what they stole, it was like a minor shoplifting thief. Now, that's not to say that people that steal a lot don't deserve to work. But what I'm saying is there is a difference to be a distinction to be made between different levels of criminal activity and the jobs that people apply for.
Beautifully said. That's so awesome. And it's so cool that you are, trying to pave a more simpler way, but yet it's also very vetted at the same time and making sure it's the right fit and that kind of thing. So I, love that you're doing that. You mentioned that you're obviously a public speaker and you're obviously very well spoken, very confident kind of guy. What are some of these? What are some of the topics you go speak about? Obviously, you're going to speak about this second chance hiring, but are there other things you're talking about as well?
Yeah, besides second chance hiring, I talk about creating those mental health and recovery friendly workplaces. I talk to workforce development professionals who actually serve justice impacted job seekers about the best ways that they can work with them to tell their story to an employer and help them think about their career as a path and not just the job that they've got to have today. I'm currently working on a speech that talks about, I mentioned freedom earlier. Freedom is very important to me. And I'm working on a speech that draws the link between personal freedom and workplace freedom, and how if companies can provide, people use lots of different words for freedom in the workplace. They use autonomy, they use flexibility, but it all means freedom. And so how do we cultivate that sense of freedom in our personal lives, and also as employers, how do we find it in our work lives, and how do we find it as employees? Because it's also an employee's responsibility to let their managers and supervisors know what level of freedom that they need and how they feel comfortable and having that show up in the workplace.
Yeah, love that. Thinking back to your childhood again about the discipline piece, how do you see that that strength and that your dad put in you about discipline? How does that help you today? Do you see that showing up in your work in the work that you're doing now?
Well, it definitely does. I can, like many people, I would suspect, I can get distracted by things that are happening about my workplace that are out of my control. So there are a lot of things happening right now with jobs across the country, people that work in government organizations. And I work, my day job is working for a large government organization around doing reentry stuff for job seekers. And I, got into a little bit of fear just yesterday, quite frankly. But that discipline, that was my first thought. My second thought was, what you need to do is continue doing what you have been doing, which is to put your head down, work hard, and deliver good work. And I truly believe that if that happens, that everything else is going to take care of itself. So that's how that discipline kind of comes in for me. I work really hard to control what I can control, and don't really worry about the stuff I can't, because if I can't control it, why worry about it?
Yeah, love it. I'm going to read a statement to you about discipline, and I want to get your thoughts on it. Is that cool?
Yeah.
Okay, here's how it goes. Everybody says discipline is so important, but they never want to tell you why. I'll tell you why discipline is so important. It's the strongest form of self-love. It's ignoring something you want right now for something better later on. Discipline reveals the commitment you have to your dreams, especially on the days when you don't want to. The future you is depending on the current you to keep the promises you made to yourself yesterday. Love to hear your thoughts. I know it's kind of a long statement, but
no, love that. Well, it contained within that is something that I often say in relation to discipline, which is that motivation runs out, but discipline doesn't. So, and in that statement, it's kind of like on the days when you don't want to do it, discipline is what makes you do it, right? It's no different than going to the gym. On the mornings when it's 5 a.m. and it's freezing outside, right. Motivation's not going to get your gym shoes on and get you in the car and get you to the gym. It is a discipline that you have established where what you ultimately want is to have a longer and healthier life, and maybe even to look better in your clothes, right?
Yeah.
But what you want is to stay in bed. That's what I want right now. It's warm in here. It's cold out there. But discipline is that thing that's going to get you up and out the door. And I think it's, in a lot of ways, that's also true for so many things in life. It obviously has to do with work. It also has to do with caring for our families and our communities, right? I mean, it's on some days when the kids got to get to soccer practice. Yeah. And I'm not a parent, by the way, so I'm guessing this is what happens. It's when the kids need to get to soccer practice, and mom or dad have been working all day, and all they want to do is veg out on the couch and order a pizza so they don't have to make dinner, but stuff has to be done. Yeah. Discipline is what gets you off the couch and gets you out the door to handle the obligations that you have for your family. It's not motivation. It is a discipline that it takes in order to make that happen. I frankly think that if more people could focus on discipline and less on motivation, that a lot more stuff would get done. Yeah.
Well, I bet you also notice that a lot in your own recovery, because, I've been through it as well, recovery, and there's things in there you definitely don't want to do. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't want to, open up my, my life to a bunch of strangers and process past stuff. And I mean, how did that play a part in you getting you through, your recovery?
Yeah, that part has grown a lot. I find the thing that helps me most is to be a creature of routine. So I have, routine and patterns really help define the discipline that I have. I go to bed early so I can get up early. Yeah. I go to the gym early because I've known about myself. If I don't do it in the morning, it's not going to get done. I'm not an afternoon workout person. I'm just not. So, I've learned these things about myself over time, and also learned, when am I trying to force something that probably shouldn't be forced? When do I have the discipline to not only take action in my life, but the discipline to step back and stop trying to control so much and direct so many things and let life just kind of run its course? Because ultimately, whether I try to force it or not, it's going to be what it's going to be. The difference is whether I do it struggling or whether I do it just kind of sitting back and allowing it to happen, right? Yeah. So for me, at least, there's a discipline in not trying to control stuff. Yeah. Because that can be difficult. I'm a planner. So, I'm the guy who, before I'm going to a new restaurant tonight, before I go to that restaurant, I have already looked at the menu 3 times. It's just who I am. I already know what I'm going to order when I get there. It's just the way that I'm wired, right? And so I plan to try to have this measure of control when I know intellectually that there are very few things I have control over. I might order that dinner tonight and the kitchen will come back and say, I'm sorry, we're out of that.
Wow.
So I planned, but I got no control over that. So am I going to fight it or am I going to go with it? Yeah. For me, most of the time it works to just, step back and go with it.
Yeah. Great. What do you love most about your life, Ty?
Wow. I love most about my life that everything that's in my life today is stuff that I've chosen. It's not, and every choice that I have is, when I was in my addiction, especially when I was homeless on the street, the daily choices that I made, there were never any good choices. It was only the least bad choice that I could make at the time.
Right.
And everything in my life today is absolutely stuff that I have consciously and not impulsively, I have given forethought to and chosen. And so as a result, everything that I have in my life is stuff that I really, really love and I'm grateful for. And even the stuff, that's not to say that life is perfect, because sometimes life is going to be lifey, right? So some days it's not perfect, but more often than not, the thing that I love is it's not because usually when I get in a place where I feel like things aren't going well in life, it's not because anything's changed in my life except for my attitude about it.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
And so that's the thing that I love about my life. And, I just have a ton of stuff to be grateful for, every single day. If the problems that I have now, at least what I perceive to be problems, are small compared to what I used to have. And most of the time, if the worst problems that I have in a day are the worst problems of the day, that means I'm doing pretty good.
Right.
I'm doing really well compared to the areas that I used to have problems in. So I'm a really lucky guy. I really am.
So that stems this next question. What do you love most about you?
I love most about me that there's a willingness to actually sit through feelings and not take action, because I have learned that my feelings, or the feelings of people that I love, by the way, are not calls to action for me. That doesn't mean I have to do anything just because somebody's upset with me or because I'm in a certain mood. Maybe it means that I got to eat a piece of cake because I love cake, and sometimes that can be the way that I cope these days. Sometimes it means I got to eat a piece of cake. It does. But it doesn't mean that I'm doing self-destructive stuff anymore. It doesn't mean that I'm out breaking and eroding the trust that I've built up over these last almost 9 years with the people in my life who really care about me. It doesn't mean that I'm going to compromise my ability to continue to serve people that I serve in my nonprofit and in my everyday life. And, that is one of the things that I really love. When I say I'm going to do something, I do it. Now, which is, frankly for me, and this gets back to freedom again, right? One of the things I love about the place that I am today is that my family finally asks me to do stuff. Like, they know I'm going to show up and I'm going to be helpful. They ask me to do stuff. And one of the worst things about it is that my family knows that I'm going to show up and be helpful, and they're going to ask me to do stuff. Right.
Yeah.
So because that obligation that's created. So it is definitely a privilege, but that doesn't mean that I don't have to constantly reframe it as freedom as opposed to looking at it as obligation, if that makes sense.
It does. Yeah. Love that. Great answers. Thank you. That was really good. Put you on the spot and you nailed it. It was beautiful.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. If there's someone listening to your voice right now, Ty, who's in a dark place, they're struggling, they're not sure how to get out of this place that they're in, and they're hearing you right now, what would you tell that person?
The first thing I tell them is to be gentle with themselves, because sometimes things are really, really bad, but we make them worse by the way that we feel about ourselves. And everybody has struggles. Everybody needs help from time to time. And I would just encourage them to reach out for that help that they're ready to get. And sometimes success doesn't mean that you get it right the first time.
Yeah.
I tried to get sober a bunch of times before it actually took. And I'm sure that from the outside, to the people that loved me, it looked like I wasn't making any progress or making any effort. But on the inside, where I was, and I was actually making that effort, things were slowly improving. It's just that the effects of the efforts that I was making weren't readily apparent to the people who weren't involved in it on a day-to-day basis, right?
Right. Yeah.
So success looks a bunch of different ways. If success could mean if you're drinking, 12 beers a night right now and you can't get to work and you're absent from the lives of the people in your life, maybe success looks like you're only drinking 6 beers and now you can actually show up and be present.
Yeah.
So, know that, a model of success for one person can look totally different for you, and just work towards whatever that model of success is.
Very well said. Thank you, Ty. If someone wants to reach out to you, Ty, and learn more about what you're doing, they want to get a copy of your book, what would be the best way for them to do that?
I'm actually very easy to get a hold of. They can go to my website at recoveryand.org. They could also email me directly at Ty, that's Ty, at recoveryandwork.org, and I'd be happy to help in any way that I can.
Okay, I love that. I will put those links in the show notes when we go live, so they can click right to it and I just can't thank you enough, Ty. It's been a great conversation. I love your passion. I love your energy. You're easy to interview.
Thank you.
Yeah, you really are. You just come across so well. So thank you for, I guess, being a light to these people who need a second chance. And you obviously needed that in your life. I've had a million second chances in my life. And I just really admire people who have gone through what you've gone through, addiction, homelessness, and, trouble with the law. But you figured some things out. You got the help you needed, and you've turned things around, and now you're giving back. I have the utmost respect for you, Ty.
Thank you. And, that's mutual. I really appreciate and admire what it is that you're doing with this podcast. I think that one of the greatest things that people like us in recovery can do is to be transparent and tell our stories so that people who are feeling hopeless know that there's hope. And so, kudos to you. Thank you for all the work that you do. And thanks for having me on the show today.
Absolutely, Ty. Thank you. And thanks everyone for tuning in and for listening. If you have a loved one who's struggling, they need a little motivation, a little more drive, a little more discipline, especially, send them a link to this episode. They will love it. They will love Ty. And please click on those links, reach out to Ty, check out what he's doing, get his book. And thank you for tuning in. And again, thanks to my sponsors. I love you guys. And until next time. And one last thank you to Ty. Thank you, brother.
Thank you, Todd. Appreciate it.